1, 2, 3.
The following is the full conversation from our episode on the Prison Creative Arts Project and what a difference art can make for people in prison.
Incarceration invigorates imagination and makes it necessary. So writes historian Peter Linebaugh in the afterword to a beautiful big book on the transformative power of art behind prison walls. That book, Making Art in Prison, Survival and Resistance, by Janie Paul, doesn't suggest that art can somehow make incarceration acceptable or more tolerable. It doesn't make the case for quote-unquote prison reform. No, instead, it shows how creativity and art making are critical survival and resistance skills, and asks, of the tens of thousands of dollars we're spending every year to keep people in prison, where is that money going and why? The book shows what happens when doors between inside and outside open. Paul offers lessons learned from years spent with her late husband, William Buzz Alexander, and the artists of the Prison Creative Arts Project, which he began. Among those, just how much creativity we have locked away with our over-incarceration system. The book also reveals what incarcerated artists have to teach about why humans make art and the power it holds. What difference does art make to all of us? It can literally save your life, as you'll hear. Janie Paul is a landscape painter and a professor emerita at the Stamps School of Art and Design at the University of Michigan. Yusef Qualls, known as Q, is a former juvenile lifer, meaning he was imprisoned and sentenced to life as a minor. He was released just 5 months ago after 28 years inside. Danny Valentine is a formerly incarcerated artist who credits the Prison Creative Arts Project, or PCAP, with saving his life. The book is Making Art in Prison, Survival and Resistance. It's out now from Hat and Beard Press. Welcome, everybody, to the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me start with you, Janie. I mean, this is not a social worker's book. It's not a prison employee's book. It's an artist's book. It's a landscape painter's book. What's your goal here? What's your project with this beautiful volume?
Well, first of all, you're saying beautiful volume. Makes me want to say that from the very beginning of this project, I wanted to make sure that the artist's work was going to be reproduced in full color and be as beautiful and as dignified as a book on Picasso. I didn't want to minimize it by not doing that. So that was my goal, and it worked out really well.
Truly.
I wanted to bring the artist's work really into the world and be taken seriously as part of the art world. That was one goal. The other is, in the effort to end mass incarceration and dismantle the carceral state, I believe it's really important for people to see the humanity of people who are living in prison, to see their full talent, and to see the potential that they have and all of their gifts and how intelligent they are. And I wanted also to go beyond what people say a lot, like, oh, it must be a great way to pass the time, art, that is, or it's a great hobby to have when you're in prison. No, it's more than that. It's a form of resistance, and it's a way to make meaning. And I can talk more about that. I'm sure you'll ask me more about that.
At the heart of this book is a project, CPAP, the Prison Creative Arts Project, PCAP, I should say, a project at the University of Michigan. Who wants to talk about what that project is and how it works? Danny, can I come to you on that? How would you describe PCAP to someone who doesn't know what it is?
PCAP is I don't know to call it a project, or they call it the Prison Creative Arts Project. But it was started by a man who had a vision, who took up for the underdog. And he did this with his own money and his his own idea, there was no funding, there was nobody putting him up to it. He wasn't doing it for accolades. I mean, this guy truly was serious about this. He felt strongly that there was something here. And it saved my life, literally, as I was getting ready to jump off of the fourth gallery during mass movement when the doors opened after count time. That's when they pass out the mail also. And that's when Buzz's letter came to me, was while I was waiting to make my move. And so I have to credit it for everything, in fact, that I'm sitting here talking to you now.
I should say we're talking about art, and galleries might be confusing, but you're talking about did you say the third floor of the building, of the prison?
Fourth floor. I was on the fourth tier, as they call it, the gallery, which is 4 stories up, and it's all open. You could just dive off the railing. It's that simple.
And what did the letter say?
It was just a letter with a one single paragraph. He introduced himself as who he was, what he was doing, and that he had heard that I was a really good artist. And he invited me to join, that he would like me to join his exhibit. And just something came, just a warmth flooded me at that moment. And the rest is history.
PCAP. What is it? How does it work? What does it look like? And who pays for it?
Okay. So PCAP is an organization within the University of Michigan. It was started by Buzz in 1990 when he did the first theater workshop he ever did. He started teaching classes in which his students went into prisons to do arts workshops. I joined in that effort and started teaching classes in which my students went into prisons. It grew, and it grew very slowly but exponentially into 3 basic projects. One project is the workshop project, which is students, faculty, and community members going into prisons in Southeast Michigan to do workshops in theater, writing, visual arts, sometimes music. The second project is our big exhibition, which we are talking about here. And the third project is our Linkage Project, which is a community of artists we have worked with inside who come home and get support from us. Those are the 3 aspects of PCAP. It was basically a volunteer situation, and then we gradually got support from the university that grew until now. We actually have a staff of 5 people, and those staff people are paid by the university. The money from our art exhibition comes from an art auction we do every fall, and from patrons. We have loyal patrons that we've had for many years.
Now, Q, what about you? How did you come into connection with these other 2 characters and this project itself?
So in 1998, I really started to do portrait work. I had been incarcerated for a few years, and my name was starting to go around the prisons whatever prison I was at, as somebody who did portraits. Well, in 2006, somebody saw my work and was like, hey, there's a program where you can take your artwork and submit your artwork, and they'll actually show your artwork in a gallery on the campus of the University of Michigan. So that was kind of intriguing, but at the same time, it was kind of like, nobody wants to see my work. Like, who wants to see my work? It was kind of unheard of. I had never imagined something like that. So I listened to this guy tell me a few more times, and eventually I said, you know what? Why not do a piece specifically to submit to PCAP and see if they understand it? Because I have a story that I want to tell about my life, and I want to tell it. And so I did. I did a piece specifically for PCAP, and I submitted it. The thing that impressed me the most was that there were other artists that came in to view the work to decide which work they would take and put in the show. I didn't have to explain the piece that I did, which I thought that I might have to. I didn't need to explain it because they understood it.
Mm.
And that was the first time that I had saw somebody get really emotional from a piece of art that I did.
Which piece was that, Q? Is that one of the ones in the book?
No, it's not that one. I haven't seen that piece in many years, because we also have the opportunity to sell the pieces that we submit, which goes a long way when you don't have support from the outside and you're only getting paid 17 cents an hour to work. So it goes a long way if you're able to make a piece of art and sell it and then use that money to help support yourself. It's a big deal.
So coming back to you, Janie, I mean, what I'm most struck by in the description of this project that you give in the book is the collectivity of it. And I just don't mean we incarcerated people. You talk about this as a collective project, inside, outside, together. Can you just talk about that a little bit? And do you describe it as teaching art in prison, or how do you describe it?
Yeah, it's not quite teaching art in prison. We're not actually teaching art at all. I think that the really unusual thing about this project, the annual exhibitions of artists in Michigan prisons, is that we're providing a great deal of validation without actual teaching. So, first of all, we're in our 29th year of this show. It was begun in 1996, and it's still going on. So the solidarity that we have with the artists inside and the longevity of this, the long haul, as Miles Horton says. Miles Horton was one of the inspirations for Buzz in creating PCAP.
One of the founders of the Highlander Center, Popular Education Center in Tennessee.
That's right. And his idea of the long haul, that you're in a fight for the long time. You don't just, in the case of people working in prisons, you're not just going in and coming out. We've been there for people for so long. And I know that Danny and Q can talk about this, that this allegiance with them, this promise that we're always there every year is extremely important.
And you describe it, I guess my point with the question is you describe it as not just important to the artists inside, but also the artist community outside, just as well.
Yes. I wanted to get to that. So the project is based on the idea that we're going in to create spaces of creativity within the prisons with us and the artists inside, whether it's a workshop that is being done or we're selecting the art for the show. And also the public who come to the show, many of them have been coming every year. You know, they actually line up at the door at this point because they're so eager to see the work. Plus the fact that they can get, they can actually buy work that's affordable. And the work is very, very intense and very excellent, as you can see by looking at the book. And so and people write comments in our comment book, and those comments are sent in to each person. So each person receives comments either about their individual work or the show as a whole. The other thing we do is that we create a film that shows every single piece of art in the show, together with an introductory section that shows the opening reception and people looking at the work. And this is sent to every prison where it's shown over closed circuit TV, or in the old days, people used to sit together and watch it. And this creates a community with the public who are seen on the documentary, with the people, the artists inside, and us talking at the opening reception. And it's an incredible learning experience because I want people to know that prisoners cannot write to each other between prisons. Correspondence is not allowed. So if you leave, you have a good buddy somewhere, you can't write to them and say, hey, I saw your work, blah, blah, blah. But you can, by seeing the video, you can see what everyone's doing.
We're talking about the annual exhibitions of art by artists in prison that's held by the University of Michigan, the Prison Creative Arts Project, which is at the heart of the book that Janie Paul has put together, Making Art in Prison, Survival and Resistance. I want to talk more about the process of the project, but out of respect, I also want to talk about the art itself and what you all are learning and teaching and revealing about creativity. So start with you, Janie. You're a landscape painter, and you begin the book with landscapes. And I guess one question I have is, why landscapes in a book that, to my mind at least, conjures up the idea of people in tiny, cramped spaces behind prison walls?
Well, for me, landscape is more than a pretty picture of a meadow or a river. I feel like landscape is a metaphorical space. It's a psychic space. It's a way to express the feeling of belonging in a place. Horizons are very important. We see things on the horizon, say a house or a few trees, and we look towards that horizon as a future with possibilities. We see foreground events, rocks, vegetation, and those are things that one can touch and feel. So a landscape embodies these feelings of belonging, of future, of intimacy, or they can. And I also think I started the book with a beautiful painting by a river by one of the artists. And I think of the river as a journey. You're journeying down this river. And the book is about a journey. It's about the artist's journey through their creative process. And it's also the journey of PCAP over all of these years.
You talk about scale and dimensionality and feeling and creativity. You definitely do take us, the readers, on a journey. Coming to you, Q, about your subject matter, can you talk about your painting, The Faces of Incarceration, and the last painting that you made before your release, Beat Down by Time?
Absolutely. So Faces of Incarceration, one of the things that you experience being in prison is you're always faced with 12 to 1,500 men every day. You have to navigate every day differently. No matter what it is you're going through, you have to find a way to deal with it to get you through the day. And so that piece is a person, it's my face, but I'm holding two masks. One mask is happiness and the other mask is anger. But my face in the painting was of me crying. That blue representing sadness, the yellow representing the happiness, the light, the levity, the red representing anger. These are things like one day I might come out and for whatever reason, I need to have some type of levity to myself. No matter what it is I'm going through, I have to read the ethers and understand what's going on around me, and I have to wear that mask. It was a survival tactic, and it pretty much took me through my journey in prison, because you have to find ways to deal with all of the things that you have to deal with. And the other piece, Beat Down by Time. So right now in the United States, slavery is still legal. People think, oh, no, it's not legal. Well, in prison, slavery is still legal. They make a lot of money. They say that for each individual in prison in Michigan, they spend between $33,000 and $43,000 per individual. I never saw that. I never understood where that number came from, because we're forced to wear prison blues, right? I had the same pair of prison blues for 10 years. So when you look at the money aspect of it, It's not talking about clothing. That's not added in. I didn't eat their food, so that's not added in. I only went to healthcare to get any type of physical checkup once a year, and that's because I had to. That's not really included because all they would do was take my temperature, my blood pressure, and give me a tuberculosis test. So if the only thing that you're spending $33,000 to $43,000 on is when I take a shower daily and that one trip to healthcare, we have a problem.
Yeah.
But I was made to work. I had to work. I didn't have a choice. It was either work or be punished. You don't have an option. I was only paid 17 cents an hour. So for 28 years, this is what I experienced. It is recognized as slavery. People don't talk about that, but read the law. The law says this is the only time that slavery is legal. Unfortunately, here in Michigan, I think they take that literally. So
the numbers that you're quoting, Q, also, I mean, those are the numbers for Michigan. In some states around this country, they're spending way more. And I think some of the inmates would say the exact same thing that you just did, which takes me to the question of the materials and the conditions and how is this work actually done physically? And that's a question for you, Danny. The piece I see of yours in the book is this extraordinary sculpture, the mermaid. How did you make that, and under what conditions?
I was in the hole, segregation, punitive segregation. You're not supposed to. You don't have anything in there. You don't have any of your personal property or anything, and so I would gather up unused bars of soap from the shower to soak in water and turn into like a clay-like substance. I made paper mache by chewing toilet paper with my mouth. Anything I could use to create mass, bulk, size, shape. And I just added, there's even a couple breakfast biscuits in there. And I finished it when I got out of the hole. They were quite impressed what I was doing in the hole, that they allowed me to continue, and I didn't give anybody any problems. So they really didn't give me any problems. And I was able to finish it when I got out of segregation with stuff like cardboard, talcum powder mixed with Elmer's glue and water makes like a plaster substance. You can glue sand from the volleyball court. You can bring it back, punch holes in a Dixie cup, in the bottom of a Dixie cup, so you can shake even grains of sand out, and you can put acrylic paint on a piece of cloth and pour that sand on there, and you've got a piece of sandpaper now. And that's how I finished it.
And why a mermaid?
Well, I always liked doing female anatomy. It was a way for me to have a intimate relationship with a woman, but it was also an acceptable form of doing female nude anatomy. I ran into problems just doing standard issue nudes, and the brass, the administration, the people, the deputies and deputy wardens were coming in and acting like they were just so appalled by it. They refused they took my art materials. They told me I wasn't allowed to create. So going to the mermaids was an acceptable way to do it.
I don't think you're the first artist to find that to be the case. Talking about the female form and talking about people who are not with us in person in this conversation, I want you to hear this message from Susan Brown, who is another participant in the program, the Prison Creative Arts Project. She had this to say from prison about a piece involving a depiction of a buck deer. Here's Susan Brown.
So often, the comparison of a buck to a prisoner. I was having a conversation with administration, and that's where the idea of how many, specifically women, are discarded once they're placed in prison. They're just thrown away. And just like a buck, when it's hunted and shot and killed, they think of it as a trophy. That's what it feels like they think of us when we're incarcerated. And they take bucks on the outside and they mount them for the whole world to see, to show this is what I've done. See, that's just what that buck represented, was us as prisoners on the state's wall to say, hey, we got more prisoners incarcerated than anybody. But instead of us doing that, let's redeem these people that shouldn't be discarded and thrown away and left for nothing. We should release them, return them to society, and let them blossom beyond the walls of incarceration, beyond the biggest mistake that they've ever made.
Janie, anything you want to add to that reflection from Susan about how women inmates especially are treated?
Yeah. For a while, there was a lot of sexual abuse of women in prison. And then there was a case brought up in the Michigan courts a little while ago, and male guards were not allowed to be in the housing unit. So that got better. But that was a serious problem. There's also, the particularities of women in prison, their menstrual cycles, things that they need for that, pregnancy. Those are all really difficult in prison. Up until recently, women were often shackled while they were giving birth. There isn't always the products that you need for your menstrual cycle available. These are some of the problems that are particular to women. And for a long time, women actually didn't have the same educational programs that men did. And quite a number of years ago, that case came up and women were also allowed those. So there's been some progress, but we only have one women's prison in Michigan, and it is very crowded. And it was very, very difficult during COVID, and many women got sick.
Can we talk a little about this country's incarceration problem? You just pointed to it in your answer there, Janie, but I don't want it to go uncommented on, Q, that you were sentenced as a minor. As far as I can see, the U.S. is alone in developed nations sentencing minors to life sentences. How old were you, and how did you, in the end, get free just these 5 months ago?
So the one thing that I still have a problem with is calling what I was given a life sentence, because it is effectively a death sentence, only slower and without a needle. They tell you you'll never leave alive. That's the same thing they tell somebody on death row.
Right.
It's only slower. I was 16 years old when I was convicted. I wasn't actually the person who pulled the trigger and killed somebody. And yet and still I was sentenced in the same way that I actually was sentenced to more time chronologically than the person who actually did the shooting. We were both given a life sentence, but with all of the charges combined, I actually had more years than him. How that worked, I don't know, but that's how it turned out. And somebody challenged that. And Miller versus Alabama, they challenged it. They said, well, listen, it should be unconstitutional to automatically sentence a juvenile to prison without some type of mitigation hearing, without seeing what this individual would or could be capable of in the future. In my case, my judge actually struggled between offering me until I was 21 and a life sentence. So if there had been a middle ground, she could have told me, okay, 20 years and then you'll be able to go home. But there wasn't a middle ground. The law was what it was, and she didn't have an option. She either sentenced me as a juvenile, which would have meant I would have got out when I was 21, or life in prison. Well, I was sentenced in an election year. What do you think made more sense for her career? This is at the time when they were calling us super predators. So I ended up getting sentenced to life in prison. The law changed, and 28 years later, I was able to be resentenced, and I came home. And the time that I was inside, my record of while I was inside was the thing that helped me come home early. I was sentenced to 31 years, and I got out in 28 years. It was one of those situations where they recognized that I was no longer the 16-year-old who made the bad decision to be with somebody who committed murder. Right. I had grown into a man. I had become responsible and accountable for my own actions. They were able to look at my record and look at the things that I had accomplished, even without their help, because there's no programming when you have life in prison. They don't have programming for you. There aren't many things that you can do. PCAP is one of the few things that you can do, but so if you spend 3 months out of the year working on a project for PCAP, that's only 3 months out of the year.
Yeah.
You still have 9 months to do what?
Well, I want to come back to you on this, Janie. I mean, what I was alluding to in the introduction is that this book is not, and the work of PCAP, as I understand it, is not about making incarceration kinder, gentler, more enjoyable. It's about something else. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of putting your finger on it, Q. Janie, would you like to just weigh in on this?
Yeah.
Would you just like to see more arts programs in prisons? Would that be a good outcome?
Well, yes. I mean, there are arts programs in every state in the country. I mean, over the last few decades, there have been a growing number of people, organizations who are really concerned about mass incarceration and who know that arts programming is very significant for people in prison. But there's never enough money. We need more resources, and there are some funding sources that have become available. I mean, when we started this, 28 years ago, nobody was even talking about incarceration on television. I mean, in the public, we felt like outliers, and at least now it is in the public dialogue. But yeah, sure. I also feel that we have to talk about art in schools. I mean, if we had a society in which art making, art appreciation was an integral part of all education and not just private elite schools, our whole society would be in much better shape. I mean, art is a basic human need. It's a basic human right. And so many schools don't have any art programs. And it's relegated, as I said before, to something that's just considered a hobby or a pastime, when it's actually a way of becoming more fully human.
Danny, was it just a pastime for you?
I have used it as such because I needed to, but it was much deeper than that for me. The creative spirit lives in me, and that's why you got the mermaid in the hole. I had to produce something. It's got to come out. But adding to what Janie said, I think that art is so relevant because everything that we see in this world, from a laptop computer design to a pop bottle design, a chapstick container, a lampshade, the cars we drive, the music we listen to, the TVs, the shows that we watch, is all a product of the creative mind. It's all art. It all starts with art. And so it's just relevant to everything that's going on in life, in my opinion.
There's been no end of discussion about what to do about our criminal justice so-called system. And Q, there's been a lot of talk, at least recently, about criminal justice reform. Do you think things are getting better?
Unfortunately, no. I think things have gotten worse because this was a failed experiment. And now states are starting to pull money out of the institutions that they've been pouring money in for so long. And now they have people who kind of resent that. The officers, the staffing that they had are quitting in ridiculous numbers. But you stack people on top of people, but now you have nobody to run the facilities that you stack people on top of. I also want to add this. With that being the case, art was cathartic for me. You know, inside you didn't have the ability to go and get therapy because you're going through the fact that I lost my mother, I lost my sister, I lost my brother, I lost uncles and aunts and cousins and my son's mother, girlfriends, best friends. I've lost these people. And I still had to deal with that. Now out here, you can go to therapy, you can deal with depression and anxiety. Inside, you don't have that. Art was my way of going inside myself and talking about these things non-verbally. But it also allowed me to deal with those things. So for me, it was a much bigger deal than just the creative process of putting a thought on paper. It was much bigger than that for me. PCAP allowed me the opportunity to deal with the things that I needed to deal with without knowing that that's what they were doing. And I think that's the beauty of it. When you go into that creative process in your mind, you allow yourself to get away from everything else that you dealing with. But then your subject matter allows for you to put it on paper. And it's just like when you speak it out loud, you put it down. I know in therapy, sometimes they tell you, keep a journal or write things down. This was my journal. The creative process was my journal, and it allowed me to come out. You know, I was able to keep my wits. I mean, I went in there as a child and I had to deal with a lot. But having that creative leeway outlet, it allowed me to hold on to the things that were uniquely me.
Janie, did you want to come in with something?
I do. I want to say something that follows up on that, which is that people in prison are treated as objects. They are given a number, they're moved around, they suddenly move from one cage to another, from one prison to another. In the art process, the artist becomes the subject, and their art piece becomes a cherished object. So this is a really big deal. This is not just a hobby. It's a way for someone to stop being an object in someone else's world and to be the subject, making choices, having pleasure, and making something that is very valuable. And in that process of making art, I also want to say that it's an intimate process. Even though the piece you're making is inanimate, you're having a relationship with it. You're having an intimate back and forth. After you've worked on it for a little while, it speaks to you. And so in a place where you're not supposed to have intimacy and relationships, you're having this back and forth with your piece of work.
Which provides a brilliant segue for me to point out that you and Danny are now a couple. How'd that happen?
That's true. I'll start and then Danny can come in. My late husband, Buzz Alexander, who was the founder of PCAP and a wonderful, wonderful man, developed dementia in 2013 and had it for 7 years. He died in 2019. Of course, this was extremely difficult, as everyone knows. And I had some part-time help for a while. Danny was from Ann Arbor, and he used to come down to Ann Arbor to see his mother, and he would come over, and he gradually started helping. Like, Danny's very mechanical, and he's really great at doing anything with his hands. And so I asked him to do some things. He did them really well. And I'm laughing because well, I don't know exactly why I'm laughing, but I think it's sort of charming. I asked him if he could organize our garage, and he did it so well and with such care. When I saw him like caring for the things, I thought, oh, I think he's a good caregiver. I think he would be a good caregiver. And I asked him to come down for a week and see if he could try out taking care of Buzz. And now I'll hand it over to Janie to finish the story.
Yeah.
Well, Buzz was my savior. He saved my life. His letter. So, and PCAP carried me for 25 years. So it wasn't even a question to come help. I mean, that anything PCAP asks of me, I do. Without hesitation. If I'm able to do it, I will do it. And but especially him. He was my friend and mentor, and oh God, my life, I gave it over to PCAP, and I gave it over to Buzz at that day. That I don't know. It was like, the only way I can explain it is like a divine intervention. That is when his letter came in them bars that day. It really was. It stopped the momentum of death. It really did. And well, anyway, so as we started taking care of Buzz, as two people who love this person with all their hearts, and we had to be in close communication every day, sometimes several times a day, because he was a moving target. His dementia was a moving target. But it's just in that process, we grew intimate, close, and I don't know. It's an incredible story, really. I'm glad to have been a part of it.
Art can save a life, save a heart, save a couple of hearts, and organize a garage.
And I just add something.
Yeah, go, Janie.
After Danny came for the trial week of taking care of Buzz, it was Christmas Eve, and he went back up to the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where he was living. And it was Christmas time, and there were relatives, and there was mayhem in the house, and Buzz got out and broke his arm, and it was crazy. And I called Danny and I said, could you please come down? He literally packed his things and drove down the next morning, Christmas Day, arrived Christmas Day evening, and then stayed. That was it.
The stories abound, and you capture many of them in the book. Personal, political, creative. I really encourage people to get their hands on this book if they can. Maybe bring it to a library near you. I'd love closing thoughts from each of you about what you've learned about creativity, perhaps, or imagination, or what you've learned from each other. There's power in the work that you make, as well as the project that you're a part of. Power here, and skills that I think are useful way beyond enduring prison time. But do you want to start, Janie? What have you learned, perhaps, in this process?
I've learned that all human beings can create art. I mean, think about it. Most of the people in prison who have become artists never thought about art before they came to prison. I mean, there were some people like Danny and Q who drew before they came in, but most people didn't. And because of their deep need to create meaning in life and to connect, they started making art. And many of them became incredible artists. And so this just shows me that art capacity is in every person.
What about you, Q? What have you learned in all of this?
I learned the power of art, and it's in the people, it's in the process, it's in the art itself. It's transformative in many, many, many ways, and it's a saving power within it. And I think that when you talked about the schools, I think they should, make sure that this art is available whenever and however they can do it, because it's a saving power. It definitely is. So this program, it's not just Danny and I who it helped. I know many people over the years who this project, PCAP, literally helped with a lot. And it's a big deal. It's a really big deal.
Danny, what about you? What'd you learn?
I've learned that the creative mind is everything. And we have a lot of talent and creativity in there that goes unseen. And Buzz and Janie and PCAP brought this out and are still bringing this out every day. And art is everything. And I think that it can dispel the lies that everybody is told about prison and people that go to prison, and how just the big lie.
Yeah.
I believe art can reveal that.
We close every episode more or less with asking the following question, and I'll ask each of you, but I'll start with you, Danny. What do you think is the story that the future will tell of this moment when we in the United States incarcerate more people than any other nation on earth, when years of so-called reform haven't really changed the trajectory, when those reforms haven't done much really to change our sentencing practices a little, and when we continue to have walls separating us, walls that your work and the art shows that you're talking about have helped, at least, if not to bring down, at least to open a door through. What do you think is the story the future will tell of now, Danny?
Well, I would hope that it tells that we need to get rid of this whole idea of slavery. That's all this is. This whole prison system is nothing but a form of slavery. And it takes advantage of the socioeconomically challenged. It creates the socioeconomically challenged, and then it gives them these rules to live and fight and die and everything for. And it's all based on a lie. And I think that if we keep pushing the truth out there through the art and other forms, we can bring this lie to the common people who are so brainwashed and lied to.
What about you, Q?
I would hope that the question is posed in the future, why did we wait so long? I hope that that's a real thing, meaning change has already happened. Why did we wait so long? It's a failed experiment. I'm just hoping that people recognize it and remedy it, rectify it as soon as they can.
Janie? Thank you, Q.
I think people will look back and see that the great accumulation of wealth by a few people and the great inequality of our time is part and parcel of the growth of incarceration in our country. That more and more poor people are being put in prison, poor people who have not had the opportunities that they need and have had their needs met. And this huge incarceration rate goes along with this great, vast inequality and the vast amount of wealth that's been garnered by a few people. And there are forces that are trying to keep that the way it is, and there are forces that are trying to break that down. So my heart is with the second.
I hear you. Now, thank you all very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.